economy in Europe. So I think that there should be a lot of job opportunities in Turkey. Now, for example, in China, we know that actually in China, I think that most people are just rural citizens. So every family has a small patch of land in the countryside. So we have migrating workers. So nowadays it seems that in China it's very hard for some companies just to hire workers, because in the past it was very hard for workers or migrant workers to seek for jobs. But nowadays it seems that they have more choices. So if you just give me a very low salary, I will refuse to work, so I can go back to my farm and so on. So this is the situation. It seems that nowadays I noticed that the salary level just is getting higher and higher in China. So of course, I think as for looking for jobs, that depends. So you do not just make any differentiation. For example, in China, if you graduate from the university, if you want to look for a very good job, you want to work in a very good company or become a public servant, maybe you should have some relatives. Okay, you need some help. But for migrant workers, okay, if you want to work in a company, it's very easy. So how about
what workers? Migrate.
Yeah, migrate. Yeah, sometimes they go back to their countryside. So sometimes, in China we have a spring festival. During the spring festival, most workers go back to their homes. And after the spring festival, they will go back to the companies. So that's very special. I don't know how about the situation in Turkey. So if you want to find a very ordinary job, maybe is it still hard?
The Chinese come for those jobs. I mean it. There is a big Chinese immigrant community, especially working in the informal sector near Istanbul, between Istanbul and Ankara. Like they say, there is no concrete number on that, but then millions of Chinese workers.
Oh, that's too surprising.
I'm just kidding. But then the seasonal work is also valid in the Turkish case.
But I think that's the difference between skilled and unskilled labor.
Yes.
I mean, unskilled labor, yes, you can find jobs, but they're mostly temporary. You don't have any protections, proper protections. I mean, you're just easily replaceable. So, I mean, the conditions are not very, productive. And skilled labor, probably there are not so many job opportunities, and there's a lot of competition going on because there's a huge rise in universities in Turkey right now, and everyone is a university graduate, I guess. So,
yeah. So far as this aspect is concerned, actually, we face the same problem. Actually, I should say.
And she's really right, and what I was going to say was goes parallel with hers. There are, I don't know how many, but really plenty of universities in Turkey, so everybody can now graduate from a university. So, and the university graduate student doesn't want to work for the lowest pay. How do you say payment? Salary for the lowest salary. So everybody, I say, I'm graduated from a university. I don't want to work for 500 liras per month. I want better qualities or better job opportunities.
Maybe we should ask you.
Yeah, fire away.
What are the major concerns of Turkey's accession in your country?
The big one is, the big one in all the polls at least is always human rights. It comes back to human rights again and again and again. And of course the recent arrests of journalists and so on sort of seem to emphasize that there is still a bit of a problem, especially with freedom of speech. I think it was Article 301 that mentioned about insulting Turkishness. And that seems to be that's certainly the one that Denmark always emphasizes when they say that, well, we won't support the Turkish or accession yet because we need to live up to the human rights aspect.
But do you think there are underlying factors behind it, or just this?
It's difficult to say. I mean, there are sort of there has been a rise in sort of far right nationalism in Denmark, in most of Europe in the past decades. and that has also had with it a sort of cultural essentialism that sort of brings the idea that Islam or Muslim countries just cannot be a part of Europe, and that idea has flourished.
But it's sort of under the surface. It's like
it's not.
They don't really say.
It's not. It's not what they say in the top of the discourse, but it's.
If you read through the lines,
it's there somewhere.
Also, in Germany, we have a big discussion about is Islam part of Germany or not? Because we have 4 million or 5 million Muslims, and the German president said Islam is part of German culture now, and then everybody else said no, and then there was a huge discussion, and we still have it. And so I think that in public opinion at home, that is a very important point for people, that they're sort of a bit afraid of Islam. I think.
It is
like a politician wouldn't say it, but people in a bar wouldn't probably say it.
It is a funny thing because it's the internal dynamics. It's the internal dynamics in our own society that are very much at least as much, if not more so, that are affecting our opinion on Turkish accession, the public's opinion. It's more about the immigrants that we have in the country rather than Turkey's actual actions. And it's the problems that some countries are facing with integration and the multiculturalism and the whole debate about how to handle these newer members of society that's spilling over into the sort of conceptions of what it would mean to have Turkey as a member of the EU as well. So that's a bit of a strange dynamic there as well. It's fascinating.
Well, for instance, what particularly is scary about, for instance, having an Muslim neighbor, for instance? And what are the particular problems that are being articulated?
Well, I don't know if there are any particular problems where you say Muslims are bad because, but you of course in the media debate, when you hear about criminals, they can often be sort of criminals with immigrant backgrounds or that sort of thing.
Women's rights.
And women's rights are of course
huge. Honor killings and things like that.
And it's also sort of not integrating properly and living in sort of ghettos, which are sort of involving parallel societies, which is our main problem, at least in Denmark. So that is something that people consider, and they, in their minds, they say, well, they come here, but they don't want to be part of our country. They want to live in their own sort of society. But I think for many that is a problem.
Yeah, I think I stand by about the branding of Turkey as a nation in Europe. And I'm focusing on tourism, but it seems like the basis of my project is that Turkey in general has an image problem, which is why, justified or not, when you look at something called the Nation Brand Index, they rank 38 countries on what people think of different countries. And Turkey, with the exceptions of hospitality and cultural heritage, Turkey was ranked in the bottom 5 in all categories. And some of it is most of it probably because it's been handled. The branding of Turkey has been handled a bit poorly. When you ask just the part about the Turkish economy, one thing is to change its economy, but people in Europe has to know about it, because otherwise, what's the point in changing the opinion if your economy is brilliant, but the Europeans doesn't know about it? And it's a very interesting project, and there's many factors which might have gone wrong or might be changed.
So you said they advertise not properly about Turkey in Europe? Well,
I think one of the biggest problems, there are several problems. One of them is the immigrants currently in Europe, and everything will be one of these topics. It's like a major topic. Another one is like the history, because whenever we learn about Turkey in Europe, and not just in Denmark but in general, most of what we learn about Turkey is like historically as something else than Europe. It's like the Ottomans. That's what Europe is fighting against. And of course, there's a whole the whole issue with sentence of immigrants in Europe, which is kind of a problem because they stay in ghettos, and actually they used to, and now they're moving out. But people look at Turks, you know, and the Palestinians and people from Libya, and say, well, they pretty much look the same, you know. And whenever somebody makes trouble, you know, it's ruining it for everybody else. And so people really don't distinguish between immigrants from Turkey or Libya or Palestine, and that's a huge problem as well, because in that way, you know, if people don't know how who's Turkish and who's not, you know, how the Turkey is supposed to distinguish itself from others.
So you say they have integration problems?
Yeah.
But I'd just like to point out it's Danish government's fault as much
Yeah,
as anyone else. They
yeah,
don't
yeah.
choose to stay
Yeah.
together. When
Sure.
they come to the country, like, it was just really, really bad planning. And
Yeah.
they were pushed outside the city, especially where we're from in August. It's very visible. Like, the minute you get on a certain bus, like, it just, the demographic changes so much, and it's really...
But it's not for
That
just
is
for the
true.
Danish kids, because I have a friend from Slovakia and also from Austria. And for the Austrian kids, it was on the news for a couple of months ago, I guess. And when Turkish citizens go to Austria to have housing, they give a proper district for Turkish people.
Yeah.
So there was a great dispute about it. And we have also called our Austrian embassy back. Am I right? I don't know, but there was a case, really a big case. So maybe the governments are right, maybe wrong. I don't know that.
I think it's probably a bit of a two-way process. Like,
Yeah.
especially when the first immigrants came to Germany, the Germans thought they would go home again anyways, and just most of the European countries thought that, so they didn't care about the immigrants, and everybody sort of ignored them. And then they didn't have the same possibilities as German kids in school
Yeah.
and so on. And so that probably led to frustration, and that's why now we're stuck in this. Yeah, I don't know.
And also,
Can I make a comment on this? So I'm not sure if it only works at the state level. And it works at the societal level. It's been very much penetrated. Of course, there is this interaction between the state and the society and their perceptions, subjectively speaking. For instance, when I went to France to study after my undergraduate degree, I had a very tough time to be able to rent a place in a proper district. And so I was told, for instance, like the deal was done over the phone that I was going to rent it, and the moment we could, you know, I spoke French and all that, and so the moment I went there, the landlord said, okay, the ID, a piece of ID, please. Okay, piece of ID, my passport, my ugly Turkish passport, and the landlord said, oh, it's impossible for me to rent my place to a Turk. So it's. I mean, you face that. Then afterwards, I lived in the States. I mean,